Live and record. Do I got it? Do I got it? Oh, live big video. Oh, yeah. Ooh, it almost looks Halloweeny in here now. Hello, everyone here on the Planet Avenger Twitch channel. Thank you all so much, all three of you, for tuning in and listening to the rantings and ravings of one Professor Boyer here at Virginia Tech, home of the Fighting Hokies. How about that ACC tournament? But I myself am in the Department of Geography here at Virginia Tech. For you first-time visitors, I am a professor. I've been here for 25 years. Teach big classes on wine and or a big class called World Regions, where we get together as often as we can to chat about what's going on in the world and how it relates to our class and stuff we're learning. Welcome all. If I could get a shout out from anybody in the chat room to let me know that you are actually seeing and hearing me. And I see Sky Daddy has already posted a bunch of stuff. Well, that was up before I even went live. So somebody give me a shout out that this is going live and you can see my beautiful pumpkin orange jacket. Sky Daddy says, hey, Boyer, off topic, but I saw a little bit of your Wine Wednesday video. Wanted to let you know that we do grow apples in Virginia still. Oh, hell yeah, we do. Nowhere near what we used to, though, Sky Daddy. They're not as much as in the 70s. Boom. I'm getting ahead of myself. Sky Daddy comes from Winchester, where I live right in front of an apple orchard. In fact, we celebrate Apple Blossom each year, which is a pretty big festival. We used to call it the Apple Capital, as we grew more apples than the entire state of Washington alone. But now they, of course, beat us, though we've fallen back, but not yet out. I agree, Sky Daddy. In fact, I know all about the history of apple production in the entire east coast of America. I did one of my original component of my master's thesis was where the best places to grow grapes. And in doing so, I went and looked at historical data, starting from the original 13 colonies, county to county, and developed a mapping system based mostly on where do we used to grow apples. And even I, back in the day, 30 years ago, was astounded. I always knew that Winchester was the apple capital. I used to have the big water towers used to have apples on them. And what was the applesauce company? Is it White House, Sky Daddy? I think White House was a big cider applesauce producer. I can't remember. I think it had the word white in the title. It's a big applesauce producer, not Mott's, something older. But yeah, Winchester was the apple center of the mid-Atlantic, and Virginia used to produce tremendous amounts of apple. Again, from the 13 original colonies forward. And then for whatever reasons, economics, economies of scale, blah, blah, blah. Now most apples are grown in Michigan, actually. Washington State, Michigan, Oregon. And of course, for reasons I will never understand, we import apples from New Zealand. So like 12,000 miles away, we import an apple from 12,000 miles to the local Kroger, and somehow that's cost effective when we used to just grow them in Virginia. Anyway, I digress. We're going to talk about Ukraine. Our cover C is giving me the Velociraptor. Oh, look at that, Sky Daddy. Again, me and Sky Daddy are on the same wavelength. I swear, Sky Daddy, I'm not reading ahead to your comments. Sky Daddy's saying New Zealand's are shipped off-season as they are in season when we aren't, since they're on the other side of the world. It's cheaper in storing than storing refrigerated apples. Mike 14 Haddock is giving me the whoop whoop. Art cover says, I can see you. Dummy Summy says, I can see you. Harold, I think it's Huon Park. Is that Harold? Mm-hmm. Harold's up in the house. White House. Boom. Sky Daddy's confirming it was White House. Only here for the Plaidcast. My favorite screen name ever. Critics of Biden have understandably latched onto the fact that Russia didn't invade 2017-2020. Could the length of the gap in escalation since 2014 be partially explained by a desire to let memories of MH17 airliner strike fade? That is a multi-layered question referencing lots of different things, only here for the Plaidcast. I will answer it quickly. No, I don't think, I think Vladimir Putin has been planning and plotting his personal invasion of Ukraine for quite some time. In fact, I think it's easily arguable he has been planning to invade and take over Ukraine for years, if not decades. He perhaps on the initiation of him becoming president 20 years ago may have had this in mind, that he wanted to reform the Soviet Union or Soviet Reboot 2.0. So this is not shocking to really anybody who follows the life of Vladimir Putin or just Russian modern history in general, specifically watching Vladimir Putin over the last 20 years, which I have. I was even in Moscow I was in Suzdal, Germany, Suzdal, Russia, in 2004 for his inaugural New Year's Eve address that we watched in this bar full of Russian rednecks live. It starts usually at midnight on New Year's Eve, and it went for like an hour and a half or 2 hours. This is 14, 15, 16 years ago now. This is way before he's the Vladimir Putin of today. And it struck me even then how enwrapped the audience was, how people already had this idea of him as a great leader, that he had already started to restore national pride. And he spoke in such a way that it became evident even to me, who didn't understand what the hell he was saying. I was like, this guy's he's gonna take Russia places. And indeed, he has. So anyway, the long answer to your short question, only here for the podcast, is yeah, I don't think that Vladimir Putin decided to invade Ukraine or put off invading Ukraine because of Donald Trump. I don't think he put it off because of Joe Biden. I don't think he put it off because of that airliner being shot down. I think Vladimir Putin has been pacing himself and decided when the time was exactly right that he was going to invade Ukraine, and he found the time right now. Probably, in my humble opinion, had more to do with what he saw happening in Ukraine. They were starting to get a little too independent. They were starting to cozy up a little bit too much to NATO and the EU under the current president, Vladimir Zelensky. Zelensky, I think, is the game changer. Zelensky, in my opinion, is the catalyst for why Putin decided to invade right now. You have to understand, Russia has been working nonstop overtime behind the scenes to affect Ukrainian politics. They've been doing it for 20 years, ever since Vladimir Putin got into office. They've been doing it a lot in the last 10 years. So it's not shocking that the Ukrainians elected someone who is as anti-Russian and more pro-Western as Zelensky. To me, it's more shocking that he ever got elected at all, because the Russians have had their hands in all of the elections of Ukraine. It was shocking to Vladimir Putin that this guy got into a power. And I think that Vladimir Putin finally got to a point just this year where he's like, no, I can't take this guy anymore. If we don't act now, Ukraine will cozy up more with the West. And if we let it go for another few years till we wait till Donald Trump to get back into office and perhaps pull out of NATO, that might be too many years. That might be a year or two too many, and we've already lost Ukraine. That's, again, I can only give you my personal assessment. That had much more. Zelensky has much more to do with why Vladimir Putin decided to invade Ukraine now. And as I was just saying on Facebook, I do intentionally say this is Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, not Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I know it's a matter of semantics, but Vladimir Putin now is a full-fledged dictator who controls all of Russia 100% completely. It is not anywhere remotely close to a democracy anymore. It's perhaps closer to a monarchy or the old czarist situation, or just outright a dictatorship. But for sure, he holds 100% of the reins of power in Russia. He holds 100% of the military power. He holds 100% of the political power. Quite frankly, he probably owns 80% of the economic power. They control the press almost in its entirety. And I say almost only because you keep seeing people get arrested. So he doesn't control the people they're arresting. They're arresting them because they can't control those people from going out and protesting or trying to report on things. So Vladimir Putin has decided unilaterally by himself. This was a strategic goal for him in his lifetime. He is using the Russian army to do it. The Russian army perhaps is, I don't know, happy to do it for him. But one could argue maybe they're not that happy to do it for him, since it's taking them so long to take over Ukraine. For those that saw me report on this in the early days of it, which has only been like, what, 3-4 weeks now? Russia's military is so much more gigantic, with so much more technology and so many more weapons. It has astounded most observers how it's taken this long for Russia to take over Ukraine. And I'm going to give you my opinion on this too. This is part of the updates I'm doing right now. So the main part of this talk tonight is something that I'm referring to as this near strike on NATO, ? Did Russia almost just attack a NATO country? Are we going to World War III? Hang on to that. We'll get to that in a second. But I believe what you're seeing here is this is taking a while for Russia to take over Ukraine. Not because they're militarily inept. They're not. And probably not because the soldiers' hearts aren't in it. I've heard a lot of people say that. They're like, well, this is Putin's war, and all the Russian, or maybe many Russians don't approve of it. That could be true. And maybe many Russian military people don't have their heart in it because it's a war of choice, and who the hell wants to get killed in a war of choice? There could be some truth in that too. I don't think so, though. I think the main reason it's taking so long is this is strategically part of Putin's plan. Remember, this guy don't do anything without thinking it through. What is the line? Okay, I'm going to give you a quote from a movie. 5 points extra credit for anybody who can tell me, the first user that can tell me what movie this is from gets 5 points extra credit. Sorry, as soon as I was saying Vladimir Putin don't do anything without thinking it through. Here's the quote. Son, the Ruskies don't take a dump without having a plan. End of quote. First person gets 5 points and tells me what movie that is from. Vladimir Putin don't take a dump without having a plan. And I can't help but think that his plan was that this was going to be so easy to take over Ukraine that the Ukrainians wouldn't have the stomach for war, that they could intimidate them, and by piling up all those troops, make such an overwhelming presence that all the Ukrainians would just be like, oh crap, okay, you win. And the reason for doing that is Vladimir Putin, for all of his faults, likely does not want to be seen as a mass murderer. So strategically, it's not in his interest to bomb to a pulp every single major Ukrainian city and kill millions of people. That makes him look bad. By the way, dictators never think they're dictators. Never. Not one dictator in human history has been like, oh, I'm totally a dictator and I'm going to do what I want. All of them think that they're really great human beings and great leaders that the people love, and they're just doing God's work or the people's work or their country's work, whatever, fill in the blank. None of them go into it saying, boy, I can't wait to go kill millions of people because that'll make me look good. And especially in the modern era where all of this can be recorded. So it's not in Putin's interest to mass murder millions of Ukrainians in order to win this territory. They could. They could have done that in 12 hours, but they didn't. So I believe you're seeing a paced, slow invasion of Ukraine so that they can minimize civilian casualties but still maximize the terror. So they want the Ukrainians to give up. They want the Ukrainians to flee. They want surrender. For those of you that followed the story from the get-go with me, Vladimir Putin made a national address in the opening days of the war saying, hey, Ukrainians, you should just overthrow Zelensky, and you can, President Zelensky of Ukraine, just overthrow your president and all this can be forgiven. He's a Nazi who's killing Russians. He's this horrible guy, which again, by the way, is why my personal assessment says, Zelensky is the reason why Vladimir Putin decided to attack right now, not other reasons. The introduction of this Zelensky was a wild card that Putin could no longer tolerate. And so again, to me, it reinforces my opinion that in the opening day of the war, Vladimir Putin went on national TV and said, hey, you guys should get rid of your leader and kill this guy and get him out of there. And therefore, by the way, everybody should just surrender. You should surrender. We don't want to kill any of you. We just need this guy gone, and to secure Ukraine / Mother Russia, whatever the rest of his spiel was. Obviously, that has not gone to plan for Vladimir Putin. And that's why this war is now 4 weeks later, and that an overwhelming Russian force has not completely taken it over yet. To me, it's not because the Russian military is demoralized. It's that they were really hoping to not have to do anything. And they're taking it slow so they don't look like mass murderers. And I'm sure the hope for Putin and his crew is that Zelensky will be taken out by a bomb or a sniper here soon, and then the rest of the country will fold. That has not happened yet, though. It hasn't happened. Much to the chagrin of Vladimir Putin, I'm positive. Should I do the other quote? I just did this to finish off over in Facebook. When Vladimir Putin went on national TV and said, "Dear Ukrainians, you should give up your president, overthrow him, kill him, get rid of him, and everything will be way better for you." I could not help but think of another movie quote. And this movie quote, you don't have to guess because it's too easy. Here's the quote which made me think of Vladimir Putin asking the Ukrainians to get rid of their president, Zelensky. "Harry Potter, I'm speaking directly to you." It was the same thing as Deathly Hallows Part 2, that after the forces of Voldemort are bombarding Hogwarts for 12 or 15 hours and killing everybody, he calls a halt and says, "Just give up, Harry Potter. No more magical blood should be spilled." Does that sound close to you from wherever you're listening to? I couldn't help but draw the parallels, and I'm like, oh, come on, Vladimir, you can do better than a Voldemort quote. But again, it's the same mentality. You want the leadership gone. You want the hero out of the way so that you can then have everybody else surrender quietly without more bloodshed, without losing more magical/Ukrainian blood. Again, reinforcing that I believe it's Zelensky that was the catalyst for this whole Putin invasion, because he was getting too cozy with NATO and or the EU and or Team West in general. But I've already yucked it up too long here having fun. Let me get back to some of the comments here. Apple Water Tower on I-81 mile marker 282 says, Theisvob, the thief OSB. Thank you for that mile marker shout out. I see a puppy face from Zinha. First time chatter from 161. It's John McPherson up in the hizzle. Thank you for joining us, John McPherson, class of 05, representing Bonsack. So we got a Bonsack and a Winchester shout out. This is like an all across Virginia podcast that's about Ukraine. Vikram Tiwari's up in the hills. So welcome back, Vikram. Says, why didn't Putin do this when Trump was in the office? Considering Trump would have most likely renounced NATO membership, that would have been Putin's best chance to have a Soviet reunion. I thought about that too, Vikram. But Zelensky they didn't overlap exactly. And Zelensky comes in at the kind of the end of the Trump, or in the middle to end of the Trump era. It wasn't really sure how well Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine was going to do as president. He was widely assessed as a completely weak figure when he won office. Vladimir Putin himself probably did not think much of the dude. For those of you who don't know, President Zelensky of Ukraine, he was a former TV actor, a comedian. It's like a Jerry Seinfeld or a Benny Hill. He was a goofball. In fact, his claim to fame, his most important television show that got him popular, was a TV show. I think he was supposed to be a teacher. Hey, like me. I think he was supposed to be a teacher that was goofing around and then on a viral video got super famous, and he ran for president of Ukraine and he won. Yes, you heard me say that correctly. The current president of Ukraine was a comedic actor who was on a TV show about him becoming the president of Ukraine. You can't make it up. But he was wildly underestimated, obviously. When he came to office, everybody was like, oh, this guy's a goof. Whatever. He's not going to amount to much. And I'm sure, I would assume that Vladimir Putin's assessment was close to that. Like, this guy's a flash in the pan. But he ended up being a kind of a pro-nationalist. a stronger figure than everybody figured, and started saying, no, I think we should distance ourselves from Russia and lean back towards the West. All this is happening as, Trump was going through his tribulations near the end of his first term, and it was an unknown. But again, Putin must have been already strategizing at some point, and he wouldn't have necessarily pulled the trigger during Trump's first term because they assumed there would be a second Trump term. See where I'm going with that? Probably thought he had a little time, another 4 years of time to deal with this upstart Zelensky while his buddy Trump was still in office in America, who definitely would not have gotten involved. Certainly would not have gotten involved as much as Team West Unified and has done in the last 30 days. So it is a interesting turn of events, and it has not gone to Vladimir Putin's plan at all, because if he really thought the entire West would have united and presented such a huge obstacle, particularly economic, he certainly would not have done this at this juncture. He would have waited to see if Trump won 2 years from now. So this was, I gotta think, a bit of a strategic miscalculation on Putin's part to do this at this time. He certainly thought the West was divided. He certainly thought Zelensky was a weak figure who was not going to last. And he certainly perhaps thought that Donald Trump was going to win another term. And that he just didn't want to wait for Donald Trump to come around and get another 3 or 4 years. Because again, in 3 or 4 years, Ukraine might be in the EU, or Ukraine might have been more cozy with NATO 2 or 3 years from now. So, and he thought the West was divided. Whoops! They were, and he fixed that. By the way, I'm not making fun of Vladimir Putin. He's brought this upon himself, and Russia will eventually win in Ukraine, whatever that means to Vladimir Putin and Russia. So it's not over yet, but this has not gone to plan. I can't imagine that Vladimir Putin said, well, yeah, we're expecting all of this. No, they were not. And they certainly weren't the biggest thing they probably were not expecting is that Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine has turned into a fantastic leader. I mean, it's bizarre. For those of you that don't understand his situation now, President Zelensky of Ukraine, was offered asylum in Western countries as soon as this invasion began a month ago. He refused. He said, no, I am a television comedic actor who's now the president, and I'm going to stay and help defend my country and rally troops. And it's like, okay, that was unpredicted. He has now become much more valuable as a symbol for Ukraine that even he himself understands he now has to stay to the bitter end, which will mean the bitter end of his life. There's no nice way to say it. He will become a martyr for the Ukrainian cause. There is no strategic value for Vladimir Putin to keep this guy alive once Russia completely takes over Ukraine. To keep him in a gulag prison is the best case scenario for Zelensky, but even that makes him more of a martyr, all right, to the international scene. So he's likely going to be poisoned and get hit by a mortar during this invasion, or accidentally die of poison once he's captured. 100% though, he says he's sticking it out to the end, and so he knows he is going to die in Ukraine, and likely sooner than later. Sorry, that's really bad news and a terrible thing to say about any human, but that's how powerful of a leader he's become. He understands that's his role, and he's sticking to it. And no one would have predicted that. Not Vladimir Putin anyway. So he's becoming more revered as Vladimir Putin is becoming more vilified on the world stage. Definitely not predicted by Putin and his crew. It is kind of astounding. He has grown into it's kind of always said about leaders. Some people are born to lead. Some become leaders because the situation is presented to them. And most people fail at leadership, but some people step up when the time is exactly right and become great leaders. And Zelensky certainly is in that latter category. So interesting times ahead for Zelensky one way or the other. And that, again, is the biggest sticking point of why Vladimir Putin is probably very frustrated right now, because Zelensky's still alive and he's becoming more popular, not less popular, which makes it troubling for a time in the very near future where Russia occupies Ukraine, because now they'll have to kill a very popular leader who's a symbol. The last thing you want in these situations is to create a martyr. That's what martyrs do. Martyrs live beyond their death, and they incite people to action even after they themselves have died. And Zelensky get this too. So it's his greatest role ever in his performance career, and he is playing it beautifully and will become a martyr. That, again, is very problematic for the future of occupied Ukraine. Problematic for the Russians, that is. Okay. What else comments should I get to? I haven't even started talking about the other stuff. Oh, am I way behind on comments? You must have set it up right, because it's not been scrolling. I mean, it's good. Let's see. Harold says there were news that Russia could go bankrupt due to bond default. Yep. Harold, you're right. That's part of the other updates is the Russian ruble has tumbled. You've seen a bizarre amount of international businesses, mostly American, who have refused to do business in Russia. McDonald's has pulled out. Coca-Cola has pulled out. I think Boeing pulled out. There's a whole bunch of companies. And by the way, earlier today, Vladimir Putin said, okay, well, if you guys are going to stop doing business, we're going ahead and putting you on notice. We are going to seize billions and billions of dollars of assets of every American and Western company who's not going to do business with us anymore. We're going to take all your stuff that's here in Russia. Yep, that's where we're at. But it doesn't look good for the Russian economy. It's interesting that Vladimir Putin controls everything, as I've now pointed out, and controls the press. And so the majority of Russian people believe whatever Vladimir Putin's government says. They have no choice. That's all the news they get. So the news they're getting is everything's wonderful, everything's great, all the Ukrainians love us, everyone in Ukraine wanted us to invade, we're there saving ethnic Russians, we're doing good, we're the good guys, we're awesome, everybody loves us. And these bad, evil Westerners are still fighting World War II. It's all there. That's them doing all that. We have nothing to do with it. We are peace-loving people, and the Ukrainians want us to come invade. I guess that's what the Russian people are being told. And everything's wonderful. Don't worry. Everything's fine. Here's the thing, though. They can BS their way through all the Russian-owned, state-run media. They can tell the people all this stuff. But the people are watching their money turn to dust. And the government can't lie about that. And the people are watching McDonald's close. And they can't buy any more Coca-Cola. And they can't get car parts. That is real. And so I actually have no idea what the Russian government's telling their people. Like, no. I don't know, maybe Vladimir Putin saying, no, we banned Coke and McDonald's. They're unhealthy for Russians anyway. Drink more vodka. I don't know that's what he's saying, but even though they can 100% control the media, they cannot cover up what's happening economically to their people. Whether that will make a difference to their people is another question altogether. It may actually galvanize the Russian people to support their government, to support Vladimir Putin. Or it won't. Or it might make them very unhappy what's happening in their daily lives because of a war of choice that Vladimir Putin personally decided to wage. It's hard to tell. That's what we'll see unfold in the very near future, too. What will the Russian people end up thinking and or doing? Okay. But yes, Harold, they could go bankrupt, the government. I got one. We already got a winner. I already forgot I gave that quote. Elias JS says, The Hunt for Red October. Yes, Elias, could you email me your real name with The Hunt for Red October that Bobble Caesar also got just seconds later. Bobble Caesar, go ahead and you email me too and tell me your real name. Let's see. Inky 2050 says, A Few Good Men. That's a very good guess. First time chatter. From 123N says never. I don't know what that was in reference to, but Thanks for chatting, 123N. Brown Miller Group says Dr. Strangelove, also a very good guest, Brown Miller Group. But the answer was The Hunt for Red October. The Blind Barber says, I've heard that Russia's big mistake was thinking that this would be a fast victory, and thus they could never set up the logistics they would need to support a drawn-out offensive war over several weeks or months. Another very good assessment, Blind Barber. But again, they had 190,000 troops and triage hospitals set up, and I'm not sure I even buy that. I think that they thought it was going to be a short war because the Ukrainians would give up, and that's not the case, but they still want to minimize casualties. And I know anybody that hates Vladimir Putin or anybody that hates Russia will say, yeah, you're defending them. I'm not defending them. It's common sense. If you're trying to take over a country and you're saying to them, hey, we're taking you over because we're brothers and sisters. We're all part of the Slavic team. We have a common history. If that is what you're pitching, which Vladimir Putin has for years, then you can't go in and kill them all, because that defeats the point of your propaganda and rhetoric up to that point. And also, if you mass slaughter millions of people, it helps turn the world against you more, who won't want to do business with you. It turns you into mass murderers. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be called, no Russian soldier wants to be called a baby killer, which people in America were called during the Vietnam War. So everyone understands how these things work. You want to minimize the conflict as much as possible. You want to achieve your strategic goal as quickly as possible. Putin's goal is the takeover of Ukraine. He wants to get that. He doesn't want to kill everyone to do it. That defeats the strategic goal in the long term. It'll be very hard for Russia to maintain Ukraine if they turn it into a slaughterhouse that pisses off all the remaining people. That makes sense? Again, just my assessment, my humble opinion. Amelia Air Force says it's been said that muddy roads were to be blamed for this. Yes, there could be conditions, although, again, Russia is quite used to fighting wars of attrition on their own soil, and the Ukraine used to be part of their soil. Russians understand military history quite good. They understand their own role in World War II in this very area where they were fighting Nazis. So I don't believe that conditions would be that frustrating to Russians. This is kind of their home turf, and they're quite used to it historically and now. LASJS says, how does Turkey fit into all this? Between the sanctions and Ukraine using the drones they bought from Turkey over the past couple of years, they have to lessen their ties with Russia, right? I'll get to that in a second. Alias JS, because that's one of the slides I want to reference. Babelsar says, spot on, here's your Emmy. Thank you, Babelsar. Host Boat says, do you know why the U.S. blocked Poland from supplying Ukraine with MiG planes? Yeah, that's easy. The U.S. does not want this to turn into a hot war with any of the NATO member states. Remember, Article 5. Article 5. If Poland gets drawn into this, then all NATO countries get drawn into this. And so the U.S. president from the get-go has said, look, Russia and everybody, we are not putting boots on the ground. We are not getting involved in a hot war with you. We are going to help the Ukrainians. And so Poland offering very lethal jets that are made in America to Ukrainians is not necessarily making it a hot war with the U.S. and Russia, but it's too close to want to dabble with it. Because Vladimir Putin could have easily said, see, Poland was doing this at the bequest of the United States. The United States is actually the one getting these MiG jets there. It's actually the United States' planes. It could be United States pilots running them for all we know. It's very easy to go down that path. Very easy. And the United States did not want anybody to have any questions. So they came on and said, nope, no. Not only do we not approve of that, we're not going to let you do that, Poland. All right? That's not why we sold those jets to you. You cannot do it. Do not do that. First time chatter. Games with JT. Fredericksburg shout out. All right. We're on the other side of Virginia again. Thanks for tuning in and for your first time chat, James with JT. Blind Barber says, an actor becoming president and standing up to Russia. History repeats itself, I guess. Oh, good call, Blind Barber. Blind Barber is dropping a Ronald Reagan reference on my ass. Thank you for that, Blind Barber. I had thought about that, and I wanted to drop that myself, but I just wonder how many people are old enough to get that reference. Pet Frog says, everybody totally overestimate Russians' military competence. No, I don't think so, Pet Frog. I've spoken to that already. I think this is strategic, slow going. Putin wanted the Ukrainians to overthrow Zelensky themselves and make it easy on themselves. Barring that, he's bombing strategically to try to grind down their morale. He wants cities to surrender. He does not want to annihilate cities. So they're going to keep kind of bombing strategic military targets. There will be civilian casualties, which are pointed out very quickly by Western press, but he does not want to maximize civilian casualties. So this is a slow rollout that he's being forced to do. Again, would he have liked to take Ukraine in 24 hours because they all surrendered? Hell yeah, that's what he was hoping for and possibly counting on. That did not happen. T.D. Clark says, hey, boy, or Tracy Clark. Oh, wow, Tracy Clark, great to hear from you. Where are you working at now, girl? Why do you think the U.S. denied air power support via Poland? I just don't get it. I just spoke to that, Tracy, so I already gave that answer. First time chatter from Erica's 13. Can we talk about Elon Musk and his personal battle with Putin? I did see, I don't know much about that personal battle, Erica's, but I did see in the news in the last few days. Did you guys all see this where SpaceX put up a rocket and the top engineer or the top person made a personal jab at the Russians because the Russians said, oh, you're going to do economic warfare on us and you're going to embargo us? Fine. SpaceX is not going to get any more Russian-made parts. And I don't know if it was the defense minister or agriculture or a technology minister said something to the effect of, fine, SpaceX won't be getting any parts. Let's see how those NASA broomsticks can get into space. So both Elon Musk and this other woman who was in charge of that launch, whose name I do not know, both referenced that. They're like, oh, look at our broomsticks go. Yes, Mac user 1232 says link please. Yeah, me too. I just told you that story. You can go link that story of just search for broomsticks. I'm sure broomsticks and SpaceX launch will find you the story I'm referencing. Vikram says, can you shed some light upon what's up with India firing a missile into Pakistan territory by mistake? Are there going to be any consequences? India testing waters? That's a whole different topic, Vikram. And I heard about that, but I don't know that much about it. The fact that I haven't heard that much about it and that Pakistan hasn't gone ballistic, pun intended, means that it probably was an accident and the governments are speaking to each other openly and that it must not be that big a deal, which is surprising because even accidents can cause major rifts between India and Pakistan. So I don't think there's much there, but I will do another podcast on that another time if you like. DeGeorgiev says, hello, I have a question regarding possible war. If there's a war between NATO and Russia, how long will you think that war would last? Well, that's an easy one, DeGeorgiev. An hour? 2 hours? Remember, we still have these things called nuclear weapons. And the biggest stockpile of nuclear weapons, I believe, is owned by the Ruskies. And if it's not the Ruskies, it's the United States of America. And if it's definitely one of those two that has the most. They have about the same, right? Intercontinental ballistic missiles and nuclear tipped ones. The U.S. and Russia own, let's say, 90% of them in the world. Hell, let's be conservative and say 80%. The remaining ones are owned by China, which has some, and UK and France. Also NATO members. So what you're talking about is there cannot be a conventional war between NATO and Russia because it instantly becomes a global thermonuclear war. And that takes about an hour for any side to press the magic red button that ends civilization, in which case the other side also presses the button for full retaliation. I could name any number of movies you could go see and watch to see how this plays out, but I will show my age and just cite a nice one called War Games from 1980 with Matthew Broderick. Might have been 82, but I think it was 80. First time chatter from Tractoraptor. Tractor. Oh my God, what a great name. Tractoraptor. Tractoraptor says, hello. Do you think Transnistria will join the fight? Are the armies in these separatist regions supplied and ready? That is a good question, Tractoraptor. I think not. I don't think Transnistria is not a big place. I don't think there's a huge contingent of pro-Russian activists there. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people in Transnistria who want to revert to Russia. That's a fact. I don't know how many of them there are. It's not hundreds of thousands, and I don't know that they have any military equipment. So they could open up another flank on Ukraine's western front, but I don't think it's been planned for. In the build-up to this Putin invasion, I have not seen anything anywhere about troop movement or supply chain over to that western side of Ukraine. It wouldn't be hard. They can get stuff in via the Black Sea, but I have not personally seen any news stories reference any movement of arms or troops or supply chains to the Transnistria district. So I don't think so. Ashley98 up into Hizzle saying, hello, I'm late. Welcome, Ashley. You're never late. We're here, and this is recorded. Ashley says that they bomb a maternity ward. That kind of cements my opinion to Putin, not going to lie. As I suggested all along, Ashley, they for sure are going to have civilian casualties. I'm not defending Vladimir Putin's war here, but I do believe they are trying to minimize civilian casualties for all the aforementioned reasons that I won't go mention again. Amelia R4 says it seems like Poland is the aggressor pushing the U.S. to war with Putin. Yeah, that's an argument you can make as well. I don't know that Poland sent those jets in order to force the U.S. into a war. It's more that Poland really, 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 really wants Ukraine to be victorious here and really, really, really wants to make sure that Russia doesn't get so aggressive that it decides just to take back all of Eastern Europe. Poland really wants Russia to either lose or at least face so much resistance that it doesn't think it's going to invade Poland. That's what Poland's all about. And Poland is, a fairly new government, a fairly new country in the modern era. It was a puppet state of the Soviet Union for the best part of the 20th century. It's a new government. They acted perhaps a bit rashly. And they're an ally of the United States, make no bones about it. And so the U.S. doesn't want to smack them down, but it's like, hang on, Junior. We, the team led by the United States, are going to conduct this war. This pushback in the way that we, elder statesmen see fit. Don't go rocking the boat trying to throw a bunch of missiles or jets into the fray. It's not time for that yet. It's not time. Sit down, Poland. Sit on your hands. We love you. You're on our team. But just shh. Poland, I'm speaking directly to you now. Okay. Ashley98 says, I am, in fact, not old enough to get that reference. Okay. I know. Ashley's also calling out the broomsticks. Bobble Sar says, I want to see a shirtless Musk duel with Putin with muskets. Oh my God. Historical fan fiction. I'm supporting that, Bobble Sar. You need to write that up right now. That needs to get in the hands of somebody that produces things. By the way, and I know how many comments am I still behind? Like 500 or just like 50? I'm back up to the blind barber. Let me pause on the interesting, awesome, the chatting that's going on. Only because too bad. So the presentations, it's really not much of a presentation. This is, again, more of a casual just update of what's been going on. And I covered a lot of the stuff, but actually not even the main one. The main point that prompted me to want to get back online tonight was yesterday, a Russian strike kills dozens in Western Ukraine. That's the operative word here, Western Ukraine. The fight thus far has been, of course, mostly in the east, deep east, from the north, and even from the south in the Black Sea area. This is the first time that the Russians have struck this far deep west, and it's significant mostly in the news cycle. That's why I caught all the news headlines, because it was only 12 miles or 12, I keep missing the quote here. It's either 12 miles or 12 kilometers. There it is. The attack on the base in Yavoriv, just 12 miles from the Polish border, also injured more than 100 people. Around 1,000 foreign fighters were believed to be training at the base known as the International Peacekeeping and Security Center. So that's where this bomb was, right here. That March 13th airstrike, only 12 miles from the Polish border. Why is that significant? Because Poland is a NATO member. And so, you know, I got to tell you, this is how the news cycle works. You put out headlines to get the most attention. You put out headlines that are going to sell newspapers or sell clicks anymore, get people to click on stuff. So you clickbait people. And so most of the news stories that I read about this in the last 24 hours have been like, holy cow, is Putin getting ready to attack a NATO country? Is this getting ready to escalate? Are we going to DEFCON 5? Or is it DEFCON 1? I forget, it goes in reverse, right? DEFCON 1 is the worst. Are we going to DEFCON 2? And I don't think that's the reality here. The reality here, and by the way, look at these great maps from the New York Times, timeline of aerial attacks by region. So February 24th all the way up, they go week to week. Or actually, no, they go in 3-day intervals. And you see they struck all over the place right when the war started, basically it's a shot across the bow, so to speak, in military terms. In the opening salvo of the war, Putin said, strike everywhere to strike fear in the hearts of everyone. Make sure that everyone knows this is real, and we're going to blow up stuff all over the place. But again, it wasn't major blowing up stuff all over the place. And then they have strategically struck in specific areas trying to take out the major cities or get the major cities to surrender ever since then. So this now strike way in the west was a lot of hay was made out of it by the big news sources of like, oh, he's going to attack Poland, and that's going to be NATO Article 5, and now NATO's evolved, and now it's global war and we're all dead. That sells newspaper. That is not the reality. And I think the reality was just pointed out here in this story. The attack on the base in Yavoriv, just 12 miles from the Polish border, there might have been up to 1,000 foreign fighters there training at a base. We live in a very unique era. I guess it's not that terribly unique, but it still seems unique. We live in a unique era that now, because of global news and instantaneous news, and people know what's going on all over the world, we have people volunteering to go get in wars. I'm just not sure that was something that happened a lot in history. You had mercenaries. You had people who would go to war for somebody else for money. But what we have in the modern era, and I've seen this now for 20 or 30 years, of people, I remember when that kid went on spring break from like Harvard and joined the war in Libya for spring break. And you're like, what the hell? So you have this phenomena where more people are just like, I believe in this cause. I'm going to go help defend Ukraine from Russians. You're like, oh, okay. So there's a whole lot of folks that are coming across the border into Ukraine to help them. I think terribly unique. And the Russians bombed this place, I think, strategically. They said, look, we're going to bomb strategic military targets. We're going to do it. That's what we've been doing. So, again, not defending the Russians. Don't care. Not defending Vladimir Putin. This is, for military people, this is a strategic military target. You have a training center where you're training fighters. Yes, that's a legitimate military target. And that's why Russia hit it. The fact that it's close to the Polish border is specifically because people are coming across the border to join the fight. And also, they are crossing the border to transport missiles and guns to the Ukrainians. And who's they? Team West. So what you saw, this is the first strike that close to the border with Poland. But Russia has been looking at this, watching, going, okay, if you guys are going to start sending in anti-aircraft missiles across the Polish border, we're going to start bombing those shipments when we see them inside of Ukraine, even if it's close to the border. That's my take on it. I got a 99.9% confidence on that statement. Russia is not dropping a bomb near Poland to ready invasion of Poland. They're bombing stuff strategically that's coming across the border from Poland, and this particular target was one of them. It's just made a big deal because it's the first one it's been that close. That makes sense? Now, said it's a NATO country. Right. And this Vladimir Putin, this whole war, this whole Vladimir Putin invasion, and for years prior to it, he's been saying, we're worried about Ukraine because we can't have a NATO country that close to Russia. We can't have a NATO country bordering Russia. We can't have NATO and the EU are bordering Russia. And I love when I accidentally came across this story because, of course, I already knew this, and those of you who taken my class know this too. Surprise, surprise, Vladimir. NATO is already on Russia's border. NATO's been on Russia's border for at least 14 years to my reckoning, because if we look at a map, and where do we got a map here? There you go. That's not a great map of it, but here we go. This map shows you Russia, and then all of the countries lit up in color that are NATO members. And you see that Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, I believe joined in 2004, or here's a better zoomed in map, are NATO members that border Russia, Estonia and Latvia specifically. And if you want to take it one step past that, this little area over here, that small dark gray region surrounded entirely by green NATO countries, is the Kaliningrad Oblast. Kaliningrad, that's Russian territory. And there have been NATO countries, namely Poland, and now Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, that surround the Kaliningrad Oblast. So, and by the way, there's tons of Russian weapons in the Kaliningrad Oblast. There are probably intercontinental ballistic weapons in Kaliningrad Oblast. So they have been surrounded. There is Russian territory that has abutted NATO countries for at least 14 years to 2 decades now, since Vladimir Putin took office. So that is not shocking, but I wanted to show that to you because now if you again reassess and look at this map for 1 second more, Vladimir Putin does have a point. NATO already abuts you there in Russia, but look how much Ukraine shares borders with Russia. Look how far deep penetration into Mother Russia the Ukrainian territory is. I don't blame Vladimir Putin one bit for being worried about the growth of NATO or skeptical that NATO countries say, hey, we don't want to attack you. Remember, we had this whole thing called the Cold War that almost resulted in global thermonuclear war because Team West and NATO hated Russia so much. It was called the Soviet Union at the time. So I understand his skepticism. And I understand his worry and fretting that if Ukraine joined, that would be a big green blob that would be way deep into Russian territory, near most of all of its major big cities, all which happen to be in Western Russia. So that is part of understanding both sides of this conflict, and even before the Ukrainian invasion began, why Vladimir Putin was having conflict with NATO, why Vladimir Putin hated President Zelensky of Ukraine, because President Zelensky of Ukraine kept saying, you can't tell us we can't join NATO. We're not going to promise we're not going to join NATO. Again, probably the catalyst why Vladimir Putin decided to invade Ukraine at this juncture. Someone asked earlier, the other big story that I wanted to update real quickly was this one. And today, just hours ago, German Chancellor Scholz, it's actually Scholz, I should say it right, Scholz, not Schulz with a U. The new German Chancellor Scholz was in Turkey earlier today to meet with Turkish President Recep Erdogan. And it's interesting. Someone asked the question earlier, like, what's Turkey thinking about all this? I have been dying. Maybe next week, if you all want, maybe next week we do all just Turkey's role in all this. China hasn't done enough for me to assess what they may or may not do in the future. Turkey, I can give you a little bit more background on and why their situation is also very important to what's going to happen in this Ukrainian invasion situation. And Turkey can't be none too happy about this invasion. And Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Recep, I don't know, I hear it pronounced 10 different ways. Recep Erdogan was getting very, very cozy with Russia over the course of the last several years. Anybody who's been in my class in the last 5 years knows this, that Erdogan has pissed off the Europeans. He has pissed off the United States specifically. He's pissed off NATO. He bought Russian-made weapons, Russian-made defense weapons from Russia that one can only think would be better at detecting Western military hardware and jets than it would be to detect Russian military hardware and jets. So Erdogan has been on the outs with Team West and been cozying up to Russia. And so he's got to be in the hot seat right now. And again, I don't want to go too far down this path because I think we should do I think next Monday we should talk about Turkey. And so I won't go too far down this path, but he is in a hot seat. His economy has been in meltdown even before this began. He has been business partnering up with Russia. He's been military partnering up with Russia. He's been politically partnering up with Russia, a country who has gone to war with his country multiple times in history. And now they're looking at a Russia that looks like it's expanding. And the reason why Turkey and Russia have been in wars multiple times is because Russia's trying to take Turkey over multiple times in history. So you got to be looking at this going, Recep, you might want to reconsider who you're partnering up with here, because you might find yourself the next colony of Russia if their imperialist expansion ambitions continue down this path right this second. He has openly, for the record, Erdogan has said, no, Turkey is not happy about this. Turkey is we respect sovereignty. We don't like it. We don't approve of it. We believe in Ukrainian sovereignty. That's that. However, he has not joined the sanctions. I say he because he's a dictator of his country, more or less. Turkey has not joined the Western sanction team, I don't believe. And that's probably a good thing. So I wanted to end on this note, since we've already gone for an hour. Turkey, because it's been friendly with Russia, it's in a very strategic situation of being a good negotiant. Turkey is a NATO member. Turkey used to be friends with Team West. Turkey has kind of been friends with Russia. They're a good broker. So Erdogan is actually setting himself up as a power broker in this situation. And indeed, there have been peace talks, I believe, already on Turkish soil. I believe there is more to come. And they can be seen as an honest broker that likes both sides or deals with both sides. Them and Israel, by the way, if I was to give a quiz on this, Turkey and Israel are the two countries that kind of like both sides of the Team West Russia face-off. And so both of them, both Turkey and Israel, have been saying to Russia, hey, we don't really like this invasion thing, and we like the whole sovereignty thing that all of us used to respect. But we're not going to sanction you. We're not going to join Team West and outright declaring economic war on you yet, if ever. So look for Erdogan and possibly Israel to continue to be the go-to countries that mediate or broker some sort of hopefully eventual peace deal. In either case, if that deal cannot be brokered, I wonder which direction Erdogan will turn next. And some of the things that he might have talked with Schultz today, because Germany and Turkey are huge trading partners and huge immigrations have happened between Turkish citizens and German citizens. They're two countries that are tied together more than you know. Maybe I'll talk about that next week too. So it is important that I believe this is Schultz's first foreign trip abroad, or at least it's the first time visiting Turkey since he took office just a month or two ago. So this is the first meeting between these two titans, and they ordinarily would have had a laundry list of 20 things to talk about because they do a lot of business and politics. And of course, they didn't talk about any of those stuff. They talked about the Ukrainian situation. I've not seen really what has come of it yet, but we're going to follow up on that hopefully next Monday if you guys approve of that topic. Okay, those are the main points that I wanted to talk about. Now I'll try to get back into the chat room for however much longer I last. The Blind Barber says, during the Korean War, some of the best Korean pilots were allegedly Russian flight instructors who secretly came to America to fight Americans 101. I agree. I've also heard that, Blind Barber. Wouldn't it be I wouldn't be surprised if Russia's thinking that was about Poland waiting to send planes to Ukraine. I also agree, Blind Barber, because I don't know how many trained pilots for that specific jet are in Ukraine. That you don't just send people a jet and be like, well, here you go. Here's the instruction manual. Take it for a spin around the block. I mean, you actually have to log many hours of training in these things. So, yeah, kind of makes sense that why the Ruskies would say, we don't believe these are Ukrainians flying those jets. They're probably Americans. And Joe Biden, U.S. President Biden, said for sure, he thinks, no, it ain't us. It ain't us, and we want to make sure that everybody knows it ain't us, and we're not approving of you guys doing this, Poland, because they're going to think it's us. REB says, if I recall correctly, Elon Musk also set up Starlink in Ukraine. Yes, he did, and offered to pick up an American astronaut after Russia threatened to leave them in space. Also correct. So, yeah, now we're getting some meat on the bones of this Musk-Putin face-off. I mean, I guess we could podcast about that next week. Erica says Musk also challenged Putin to a one-on fight for Ukraine. I didn't see that. I don't think Elon Musk is that foolhardy, but maybe he is. Putin is a judo master. Musk ain't taking him out. Ashley says Musk is wild. Shen48 up in the hills will say, I may have missed the answer to this, but are you surprised at China's openness to providing military aid? Shen48, I would be surprised because China has not given Russia military aid. In fact, they denied that any aid was even asked for. So to date, the United States has only reported that they think that Russia asked China for military and political and economic aid. It has not been established that that actually did happen, nor was it established or has been established that China provided anything. Let's see. Mike 14 Haddock is replying to Emily. Says, need some positive reinforcement that this won't happen, please. It's not going to happen. Don't worry. Everything will be all right, Mike 14. You'll know at least a day in advance. Bobblestar to stock up on thyroid pills. Yeah, thyroid pills. That's what I'm worried about. Ashley saying, would they really choose to kill off the entire world, including themselves? These are questions that none of us can answer. None of us can answer what would ever be going through people's heads who actually own intercontinental ballistic nuclear tipped missiles. It's hard to fathom that any human would say, I'm going to be the one that ends humanity so that my team wins. Because obviously, if your entire team is dead, it didn't win. So the whole idea of using nuclear weapons is just baffling if you sit down and think about it for any period of time. I suppose the hope, it's a pretty black, scary hope, but I guess the hope is that it would be a limited nuclear strike just to show that you're serious about it and you'd only kill millions instead of billions. And then everybody would be like, oh, okay, you actually did do that weapon. Okay, we're not going to do ours then. To me, again, that does not make any sense either. If Russia killed only 1 million U.S. citizens or only 1 million Polish citizens or only 1 million Italians, would the United States really only kill 1 million Russians? So we just send one missile at a time at each other? That doesn't seem probable either, which is why nuclear weapons are scary. Ashley says, I wonder if separatists from other countries that wanted to join Russia are relieved they didn't manage to at this point. That's a good question, Ashley. I can assure you that Ukraine and Georgia and other countries that wanted to join NATO really wish they'd have gotten to NATO by now. I did actually hear a lot of literal Russian people, Russian citizens are leaving Russia. I don't know. I can't verify this. I'm just a human here in Virginia. But I've heard thousands of Russian citizens are leaving, and a lot of them are going to Georgia because they're either anti-war or they see Vladimir Putin turning into the next Stalin or the next Tsar, or if I was a Russian person, I would get the hell out of the country. Again, we're all unique individuals. We all think differently. I want to get the hell out of the United States sometimes because I think my freedoms are getting trampled on a little bit too much. So I grew up here. That's what I'm used to. I don't know what the average Russian is used to. But I can just tell you, if I was in Russia right now, I'd be getting the hell out of Dodge because this is not going to end well for Russian citizens. One of two things is in store for Russian citizens for the rest of this decade. Absolute economic decimation and or Putin wins his war and it comes to glory for all, except that now anyone who ever says anything, anyone who ever expresses an opinion, anyone who ever expresses protest at anything with the government, it just dies. It really is it looks like it's a return to the bad old days for Russia, for Russian citizens. It kind of looks like I hate to say this because I like Russian people and I want them to lead good lives and not be worried, but go look up the Great Purge or the Great Terror under Stalin in the 30s. It's called the Great Terror. And I kind of feel that's where Putin has taken his historical playbook from. So the Great Terror, aka the Great Purge, is when Stalin really went fully psychotic in the late 20s and 30s of the last century, by the way. I'm sorry. The previous century. The 1920s, 1930s. The Great Purge was when Stalin went completely psycho and literally just killed anyone who ever said anything bad about him, killed any political opposition who just had different ideas than him, killed all members of all political parties who would raise hackles about anything the Communist Party would have ever been doing or had done or would do in the future, killed them. If you were a political opponent of Stalin, he would kill you, then he'd get to work. That's another movie quote right there. He doesn't kill you, he kills your entire family, your entire business. Back in the day, in the Great Purge, Stalin would have killed you, for starters, and then killed your whole family, and then killed all your cattle and livestock, your pets, your cats and dogs. He might kill your neighbors just because they live close to you. I mean, and that's the playbook for dictators like him, because it makes the average people so terrified that you won't ever say or do anything. I ain't pretending like I'm some badass. If someone came in and slaughtered the whole neighborhood that I lived in except me, I'd probably be like, okay, that's cool. Whatever you want. So that's the playbook. And I kind of see that's where Russia's going right now. And it's sad. And I kind of think a lot of Russians are probably thinking this too. So one way or the other, their economy's not looking great. They're getting isolated from the world. And even if Putin wins, it will strengthen him further to completely destroy any dissent at home. Doesn't look like a fun place to live to me. But I didn't grow up in Russia, so I don't know. First time chatter from Crowder, Vermont. Crowder, Vermont. Love it. Mishiram states, I think all the trouble in this case really started in 2008 at the NATO summit in Bucharest, where afterwards NATO issued a statement that said Ukraine and Georgia. Okay, yes, I have seen reference to that. And there are many thinkers like Mishirim who are saying that NATO has really partly, or if not fully, to blame for stoking these tensions with Russia. So absolutely, a crowd of Vermont, NATO has expanded at a time when the Soviet Union collapsed. Russia lost all of those previous either satellite states or territories of what was USSR. And those countries / territories ended up joining NATO at a time when Russia was weak. And from Russia's perspective, they would say, why is NATO expanding? NATO was only created to counter an aggressive USSR. There is no more USSR, and we're not being aggressive. In fact, Russia is retracting. Why would you be growing this military outfit that was built to stop us when we're not doing anything? That was the argument that was made by people like Putin all throughout the 90s. And then when he became president in 1999, he started stating it verbally all the time. Why is NATO still growing? And NATO's growing while we're weak, and that's an affront to us, and it makes us uneasy. It makes us unhappy. It makes us tense. We don't want to be tense. It has a lot to do with Putin's thinking and Russian foreign policy, quite frankly, throughout all of Russia's history, not just in the last 20 years. Russia has been in perpetual worry about its borders. It's the main thing that defines Russian foreign policy. So Mishirim, Crowder Vermont is pointing out, Mishirim and others like him have said, if we had not done that, have NATO not expanded, we wouldn't be talking about all this now. I can completely understand that side. Absolutely. I think it's perhaps pushing it a bit too far to say, if NATO never would have done anything, we'd all be happy. We don't know. That's some armchair historian. That's your Monday afternoon quarterbacking from your lazy boy. You don't know how history would have unfolded. And so given Polish history and its relations with Russia, given Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania's past history with Russia, given Ukraine's past history with Russia, it's not all rosy. Some of it's really bad. So given their perspective of these newfound states, starting in 1991 when the Soviet Union imploded, I can't blame these countries for wanting to join NATO, for wanting some security for a time in the future when Russia became way more powerful again and would gobble them back up. And that is exactly what has come to pass. So we're looking at a kind of chicken egg thing here, Crowder, Vermont. There are those thinkers that say none of this would happen if NATO hadn't grown. And then others that say had NATO not grown, Russia already would have taken back Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Ukraine a long time ago. And it's easy to argue both sides, by the way. To me, it's simple to argue both sides. All I can tell you is if I was a Russian, if I was Vladimir Putin, I would want my territories back. And if I was an ethnic Estonian, I would want to not be part of Russia again. So it's easy to argue both sides, quite frankly. But we are where we are. So we take what we've got right now, and then we try to understand it and move forward. Balazar says, to Ashley, if Putin was out of options and Russia was being invaded, he would destroy the world. Yeah, and maybe Joe Biden would too. Maybe Xi Jinping would. In fact, I'm sure Xi Jinping would. I'm sure Kim Jong-il would. Kim Jong-un would. I'm sure Kim Il-sung would. That's all the Kims in North Korea. By the way, here's a little historic tidbit of fun for you. I learned this, and I used to lecture about it in class. Remember when I used to lecture in class? I miss McBride 100. McBride 100, I'm speaking directly to you.
Piece of, like, the ceiling just fell or something?
Where was I going with that? Oh yeah. So those comments are in reference to, would people really be so stupid as to start a nuclear war or launch a nuclear missile, even knowing they would kill themselves? No one would really do that, right? I got woken up to this little tidbit of fun fact a long time ago in a movie called The Fog of War. It's a documentary. It's a heavy one too, by the way. The Fog of War with former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, who was in charge during the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. And I'll cut to the end of the story. Decades after the standoff and the Soviet back down of supplying ballistic missiles to Cuba, decades later, literally 40 years later, Robert McNamara met Fidel Castro, who was in charge of Cuba at the time, and said something to the effect of, well, you guys never would have launched one of those missiles anyway. I mean, it would have been the total annihilation of Cuba. Had Cuba launched even a standard missile at Miami, the United States would have literally destroyed the entire island of Cuba. There's no debate here. Would have caught it on fire with missiles and every person would have died. And so McNamara said to Fidel Castro, obviously, you would not have used one of those missiles knowing the repercussions. And Fidel Castro said, without hesitation, absolutely, absolutely, I would have used it, and I wanted to. I wanted to use it, and I was so pissed off the rest of my life because the Soviet Union wouldn't give me those missiles. I wanted to launch against the United States. You're like, but every single one of your citizens would have died. But it would have stood for something. It was symbolic, and it would have showed how horrible the U.S. was that they would have killed all those people. And you're like, oh, wow. Okay, buddy. That's why we shouldn't have missiles. That's why you get ants, all right? That's why these people shouldn't have missiles. And by these people, I mean humans. Humans are passionate, and logic sometimes does not always win the day, and increasingly it seems like it never wins the day. So take that story and run with it if you want. And the name of the movie is The Fog of War. Hopefully I gave you some good feedback there, Crowder, Vermont. Love the screen name. Thirsty Beta says, watched Ukraine on fire. Is this film accurate or Russian propaganda? Send me a link to that, Thirsty Beta. I do not know that reference. By the way, anybody in class right now, send me an email right this second with your screen name and your real name. And then points just might appear in your lives. I don't know. DeGeorgiev says, I have a question regarding NATO in Article 5. Let's say Poland invades Ukraine against the Russians. Would the other NATO members be forced to join, or would other NATO members only be forced to join if Russia invades Poland? You are correct on the latter. Good call, DeGeorgiev. The latter. The latter. If Poland goes and invades Taiwan tomorrow, I know, right? China's going to do that, not Poland. But if Poland invades Taiwan, that is a Polish act of aggression against somebody else. NATO is a defensive organization. Defensive. Defense. And so that would not apply. Article 5 would not apply in that scenario. They could claim Article 5, but assuredly in the closed-door session at NATO headquarters in Brussels, the other countries would not agree to an invoking of the Article 5 and would not support that. In fact, NATO... It's not, everybody even doesn't vote. I've been to NATO headquarters. Remember that back in the day? We went to NATO headquarters and had a great little talk with the lady who explained how NATO works. And it's interesting, even I didn't know it until I was told this. They don't really have votes at NATO. There's no voting. They just talk it out. And so everybody gets around a table and they just say what happened. Okay. And then it just kind of a general consensus comes at the end of the conversation. And therefore, there's no vote, there's no veto, but there has to be a consensus among the members. And so it's very easy for France to be like, well, okay, we're having this discussion. We don't really agree that Poland was attacked. Or Canada could say, well, here's some maple syrup, eh? And we don't think that this Article 5 applies to this, and even if Polish soldiers then get killed by Taiwan soldiers, that doesn't count. That's not an attack on Poland, so we're not so sure. That's how the talk would go, and so I can't imagine any scenario in which Polish soldiers personally, the Polish state personally, says, hey, we're going to go start repelling Russian invaders in Ukraine, a territory that is not theirs, and then being able to claim Article 5. It just wouldn't work that way. Vikram actually says, I can answer that. Oh, see, Vikram's already got all the answer there. Sorry, I went off on a spiel. I didn't read far enough ahead. Ashley says, if Russia directly attacked Poland, then NATO. Boom, everybody knows how NATO works. I got to assume it's because you took the course. Oh, you can be super smart about NATO, never having taken my course. First time chatter says, Boo Bear. First time chatter, Boo Bear says, Hogan's Heroes. Schultz. Thank you, Boo Bear. You must be as old as me to get that reference. Okay. What's up with the U.S. and other Western countries not declaring a no-fly zone in Ukraine? Does that no-fly zone mean declaration of war? Again, Vikram, all these questions are kind of on the same wavelength of why U.S. President Biden is saying we're not doing that, and NATO is saying we're not doing that. A no-fly zone is, militarily speaking, is an area of airspace that an entity operates in and will deny anyone else from flying in. To say we're going to set, and by the way, President Zelensky of Ukraine keeps asking for it. Zelensky keeps saying, hey, NATO, you need to set up a no-fly zone in our country. Yeah. Airspace is the same as land territory for sovereignty purposes, and if any NATO country, or NATO as a whole, goes in and controls the airspace over another state, Russia will not have it. And they'll say, you are controlling the air and you're going to shoot down Russian jets? That's an act of war. And Russia is correct on that assumption. That would be NATO or Poland or the U.S. shooting down Russian planes. That's what a no-fly zone does. And that would be an act of war. And U.S. President Biden and NATO does not want to do that. Only here for the podcast says, what repercussions do you see for Alaska? Increased militarization, perhaps reactivation of Attic Naval Air Station in the Aleutians. Ooh, wow. That's some deep reference pools right there. Only here for the podcast. Thanks for that. Most people don't even know where the Aleutian Islands are. I happen to, only here for the podcast. I sailed around them. I've set foot on one. So maybe you might see the bigger, to me only here, the more interesting component of your question isn't about the U.S. Militarizing Alaska more because of Russia. I think the interesting component of that question is China would be very bothered by that. And so it could very well be, and my diplomatic mind is racing here now with fresh energy. To me, the United States' best move is to basically tell China, if you back Russia's play here, you are forcing us to militarize Alaska. Right? And Guam. Right? And anything else in the Pacific Ocean, which would include some island territories of the British and the French. Right? And that would really bother China. So there is some diplomatic energy there, or diplomatic opportunity there, to not force China's hand. China's hand is not going to be forced, but it's a card they can play. So I don't think there's any point in rearming Alaska because of the Russians. It's more that you'd rearm Alaska and other Pacific islands to pressure China, to pressure Russia, or at least to pressure China to not agree with what Russia is doing. Because China very much would be upset by any Team West militarization in the Pacific. And that's a diplomatic card that the U.S. is probably going to play. Good question. Ashley says, really interesting that Israel will be on both sides when the West created their entire country. Well, the Israeli army would disagree with that, Ashley. But we should do a whole talk just on Israel. But Israel has long had relationship with both sides of the old Cold War, even though they typically favor Team West a little bit more for historic reasons that you're alluding to. But they are still an international player, and they get weapons from both sides. First time chatter from a glass on, glass off. Glass on, glass off. Glass on, glass off. Thoughts on the U.S. comments about China considering providing aid to Russia? Just posturing. Just posturing. Glass on, glass off. As I've suggested, I've not seen anything anywhere that confirmed China was going to do anything. In fact, China, to my knowledge, right now, Monday evening, 9:30 on March 14th, China has denied that this request even came in. And Russia has denied that this request came in, much less that they would have actually done something, much less that they would have commented about doing something had they done something. So if anything's going on, we're not going to know, and China's certainly not going to make it public. Hokey Medic up in the house. Hokey Medic 2015 says, I think we settle this with wine. One Russian bottle against one Ukrainian bottle. I'll be the judge. Just send them to my P.O. box in the Caribbean. Kablam. I like where you're thinking there, Hokey Medic. What island will you be on? I'm joining. Ashley also agrees with my assessment of Russian citizens would be pretty panicked by what's going on right now, and I would pay to see what's going on in Putin's head and where the mental state is. I don't think you want to look down that abyss, Ashley. I wouldn't want to look into the mind of Putin. That'd be like being John Malkovich. Another movie reference for you. Man, I'm full of them tonight. First time chatter from CZ. Soldiers are the most innocent. Soldiers are the most innocent. When it comes to big powers, correct. Soldiers do what they are told to do. And in many cases, including in Russia's history, if the soldiers in the front didn't want to move forward, they got shot in the back. And then the next soldier behind them picked up the gun and moved forward. So, yeah, being in the military is all great and dandy and awesome, and it's a good career, and it's a good opportunity, and it's good, sometimes good pay, and it's sometimes good for advancement, until a war starts and you actually have to get called to do what a military actually does, which is kill and or be killed. Type Roeshek says, looking fresh today, Professor B. Well, thank you. I found this jacket at a Goodwill. I'm trying to think which one. I still don't even know what this is. Check this bad boy out. Boom. Oh, and that's actually, the color just changed. This is actually more the color in real life that this just changed to. The lighting is making it look more light. Oh, did you see that change? Can you physically see that change? Pull it up. Oh, yeah. This sucker's full on, like brilliant tangerine. Oh, look at that. And I don't know what the ACA is, but I like it. It's my favorite orange jacket ever. Let's see. Ashley says Russia's already started banning social media. Oh, yeah, that also happened when Facebook, a.k.a. what do they call themselves now? Infinity or Data or what's Meta. Oh, my God. Could you be more meta stupid? Meta, there's some tiff between Meta and the Russian government, and so they're shutting down services, or the Russians are shutting down their services, and or Instagram shut down in Russia, or Russia shut down Instagram in Russia. I don't know how those technology things work. Babelzar says only one Emmy per live stream. I don't even know what that means. Dark Knight remembers McBride 100. Okay, I do have to go. I haven't eaten dinner yet. So please hit me up if I haven't answered your question on email. Host Boat says, I'm no longer World Regents, but can I get the points for Geography of Wine? Sure, why not? Give me a holler. Thirsty Beta says, Ukraine on Fire is a 2016 documentary produced by Olive Stone. Thank you for Thirsty Beta. I'll check that out. Ashley98, always give me the most awesome comments. She might have to drop World Regions. No, Ashley, that's not going to happen. Hit me up on email, Ashley. Okay. R Cover C says, I don't think you have to watch a single movie to get an A. Actually, watch Hogan's Heroes with the grandparents. Okay, I see a lot of folks chatting about the course now. That's awesome. I love seeing that. Tapro Ashek has got me a link I got to go check out about the no-fly zone. Cool. All right, am I missing any other major questions, comments? I do like to give all the shout-outs to the first-time chatter from Pedestrian of the Apocalypse. Wow, great screen name. Pedestrian of the Apocalypse. Thank you for first-time chatters. Thoughts on world reaction in the event of substantial verifiable use of chemical weaponry by Russia in Ukraine? I got to be honest, Pedestrian, probably not much. It will only serve to further diminish Russia's reputation in the West, and it may get a few other countries to dislike Russia more. And I'm thinking of countries like Pakistan. Pakistan, actually, I should probably do a podcast on Pakistan. Pakistan's leader is probably getting ready to lose power because he was hanging out with Putin on the day the invasion started and just kind of laughed about it. So that's Imran Khan, by the way. Pakistan is not taking a stance of any of this situation. I'm not sure India's made a really huge statement about it. So there are countries that haven't gotten into the fray of picking a side yet. Use of chemical weapons by Russia would encourage more countries to take a side against them. But that's about it. There's not going to be any tangible action. Russia is already conducting an illegal war on another sovereign state's territory, which means it doesn't care about the rules. And the United States, Team West, led by the United States, has said, we're not going to get involved in a hot war in Ukraine under any circumstances. So what it is what it is. The use of chemical weapons won't change the reality. It will only change some opinions, perhaps. Cameron says, if and probably when Russia takes Ukraine, is there anything else you think the West will do beyond sanctions and assertion of defense of the borders? Yeah, you'll see military spending go through the roof for the first time since 1981. A new Cold War is on. It's a Cold War that will, much like the last one, be defined by excessive military spending, and perhaps, unlike the last Cold War, excessive military spending in space. Remember Ronald Reagan, who we've already referenced in this podcast, famously invented a Star Wars laser system that could shoot down missiles. It was a farce. It never existed. But the technology is there now for a lot more things to be done for strategic missile defense, Star Wars type systems, maybe even things on the moon. So I'm guessing the new Cold War will see an exponential rise in defense contracts, military weaponry, military armament, retraining of troops, increase of troops, increase of troops, of U.S. troops on foreign soil. Remember, that was all going backwards. Donald Trump wanted to close down, or did close down, the German military bases. I'll bet you'll see them come right back. So there's going to be a militarization of a different flavor than the last Cold War, but that's definitely going to happen for sure. That's the one thing I'm positive is going to happen. The rest of it, don't know. Don't know. Again, it all plays a lot into what China ends up doing. Let's see. Only here for the podcast. Thanks for addressing Alaska. I visited Adak for the work and explored the ghost town base. It would be surreal to see it come back alive again. Wow, that's interesting work you do there, only there for the podcast to get to that little island in the Aleutians. Okay. Gotta love the goodwill. Always find good stuff from Ashley. First time chatter from Maroon Hooligan. Maroon Hooligan already looked up my jacket description and says Aka is a fraternity type deal. It's called Shriners. Yeah. I kind of got that from the symbology. I got that symbology from my youth of Shriners conventions and people who did parades and stuff, but that culture was always lost to me. Thank you to all. Thank you for the first time chat, Maroon Hooligan, and for looking it up. Thanks to Twiction, who says they love me. I hope you're well as well, Twiction. Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I really thought this was going to be just like 45 minutes because I was just going to talk about the NATO strike, but look how much ground we've covered and how much good stuff. Ashley's grandpa's a Shriner. And that's why your grandpa made you watch Hogan's Heroes, Ashley. Thank you all here in the Twitch world for tuning in and hopefully subscribing to the Plat Avenger channel on Twitch. I love doing this stuff and would like to do it for a living. I'm just trying to find the time to do it and the viewership for good people like you all who both follow me here, also subscribe. And Agent G99 just subscribed with Prime. Thank you, Agent G99. Great screen name as well. And I want you all to have a great evening. Please spread the word about the Plat Avenger channel. Do your likes, your clicking, your following, and your subscribing, and we'll keep on going forward on this stuff. Hopefully you learned a lot of stuff, and we'll learn more stuff next time. Please email me with your names if you're in my classes. And email me with any questions you might have. joboyer@vt.edu. It hasn't changed for 29 years since they invented email. Of any further questions or other topics you would like to see covered on this Plaid channel. That's all for now. As always, party on, and we'll see you same Plaid time, same Plaid channel next week.